My name is Hannah Carter. I'm 26 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas, in a small apartment near the Colorado River. From the outside, my life looks steady. I walk the city's trails, sip coffee in quirky cafes, blend into the hum of this vibrant place. But inside, I carry a wound that's never fully healed, a fear of being cast aside that makes me guard my heart too closely. It started when I was 17, the night my mother, Diane Carter, looked at me with cold eyes and told me I was just like my father. Then she kicked me out, leaving me with a suitcase, no money, and a heart shattered by betrayal. I rebuilt my life from nothing, but the scars she left still shape me. Years later, when she came begging for help, I found the strength to choose myself. It all goes back to the divorce. I was 16 when my parents split. My father, Michael, moved across the country, and I stayed with Diane in our old house in Houston. At first, she was just distant, burying herself in her own grief. But as the months passed, something in her hardened. She'd snap at me for small things, leaving dishes in the sink, staying in my room too long. Her words grew sharper, her eyes colder. "You're just like him," she'd say, spitting the words like they were poison. I didn't understand what she meant. I wasn't close to my father, and I wasn't trying to take sides. But to her, I was a reminder of everything she'd lost. The night it happened, I was 17, sitting in the living room trying to talk to her about college plans. She was on the couch, staring at the TV, a glass of wine in her hand. I asked about financial aid, and she turned, her face twisted. "You think you're entitled to my help," she said. "You're just like your father, always taking, never giving." I tried to explain, but she cut me off. "Get out," she said, her voice low and final. "Pack your things and go. I can't look at you anymore." I stood there, stunned, waiting for her to take it back. She didn't. She pointed to the door, and when I hesitated, she grabbed my arm, pulled me to my room, and watched as I threw clothes into a suitcase. I begged her to explain, to let me stay, but she just said, "You're not my problem anymore." The door slammed behind me, the lock clicked, and I was alone on the street. I was 17, with no money, no plan, just a suitcase and a heart full of hurt. I crashed with a friend for a few weeks, then took a bus to Austin, a city I'd heard was full of opportunity. I scraped by, working odd jobs, waiting tables, cleaning houses, until I could afford a tiny apartment. I learned to survive, to keep people at arm's length, because the one person who should have loved me had thrown me away. The fear of abandonment clung to me, making it hard to trust, to let anyone close. Every time I met someone new, I'd brace for rejection, expecting them to see me the way Diane did, unwanted, unworthy. For years, there was silence. No calls, no letters, no apologies. I didn't reach out either. I was too raw, too focused on building a life from the ground up. I found a rhythm in Austin, walking its trails, finding comfort in the city's energy. But the pain never left. I'd catch myself wondering why Diane hated me so much, why I was so easy to discard. I carried that question like a weight until one day, out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was her. I was sitting in my apartment, the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds when Diane's name lit up my screen. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard her voice in years, and part of me wanted to ignore it. But curiosity won. I answered, keeping my voice flat. "Hello!" Her voice was shaky, nothing like the cold steel I remembered. "Hannah, it's me," she said. I need your help." She sounded desperate, her words tumbling out. She'd lost her job, her house, everything. She was staying in a cheap motel, running out of options. "I don't have anyone else," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, can I stay with you, just for a little while?" I listened, letting her words fill the silence. I pictured her alone, her pride shattered. But all I could see was that night in Houston, the door slamming, her face blank as she turned away. I saw the years I'd spent piecing myself together, fighting the fear she'd burned into me. I wasn't that scared, obedient girl anymore. I'd grown, found my own strength, and I wasn't her fallback plan. "Diane," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you threw me out when I needed you. You don't get to come back now because you're out of options." She gasped, then started to plead. "Hannah, I was wrong. I was angry, hurt. Please, I'm your mother." I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. "You stopped being my mother the night you locked that door. I'm not your backup plan, not anymore." She started to cry, calling me ungrateful, selfish, but I hung up, my hands steady. For the first time, I felt free. But I knew it wasn't over. Diane wasn't the type to give up easily. She'd always cared about control, about getting her way. I expected more calls, maybe even her showing up at my door. I needed to be ready to hold my ground. I started thinking about how to protect my peace, how to make sure she understood I wasn't going back. I'd spent years rebuilding, and I wasn't letting her tear that down. The pain she'd caused was still there, but so was my resolve. I was choosing myself, and I was ready to keep that choice. The Austin skyline shimmered outside my apartment window, the Colorado River catching the last of the evening light. I sat on my couch, still reeling from the phone call with my mother, Diane Carter, a few days ago. Her desperate voice, begging to stay with me after losing her job and house, echoed in my head. But so did the memory of that night in Houston when I was 17. When she told me I was just like my father and slammed the door behind me. That betrayal had carved a deep wound, a fear of abandonment that made me keep everyone at arm's length, always bracing for rejection. Hanging up on her, saying I wasn't her backup plan, had felt like a weight lifting, but I knew Diane wouldn't let it go. She'd always been stubborn, and I needed to be ready for her next move. I wasn't that scared teenager anymore. I'd built a life in Austin, and I was determined to protect it. The days after the call were tense. I kept expecting my phone to buzz again, Diane's name flashing on the screen. Part of me wanted to block her number, but something held me back. Maybe curiosity, maybe the need to hear her try to justify herself. Instead, I focused on grounding myself, walking the trails near Lady Bird Lake, letting the rhythm of the city calm my nerves. But the old fear crept in, the one Diane had planted when she threw me out. It whispered that I was being too harsh, that maybe I owed her something. I had to remind myself of the truth. She'd chosen to abandon me, left me with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. I didn't owe her anything. Then one morning, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. My stomach dropped as I recognized Diane's handwriting, sharp, slanted letters spelling out my name. I hesitated, then tore it open. Inside was a letter 2 pages long, written in her precise script. "Hannah," it began, "I know I hurt you. I was in a dark place after the divorce and I took it out on you. I shouldn't have said you were like your father. I shouldn't have pushed you away. I'm alone now and I've lost everything. Please give me a chance to make it right. I just need a place to stay until I get back on my feet." She went on, describing her motel room, her empty bank account, her regret. It was the closest she'd ever come to an apology, but it felt hollow. All I could see was her face that night, cold and unyielding as she locked me out. I sat on my couch, the letter in my hands, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Part of me wanted to believe she'd changed, but the words rang empty. She wasn't sorry for me. She was sorry for herself, for losing her comfortable life. The letter didn't erase the years I'd spent rebuilding, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep in a stranger's spare room, the way I still flinched when someone got too close, afraid they'd leave me like she did. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, not ready to throw it away, but not willing to let it sway me. I needed to stay strong, to keep choosing myself. To clear my head, I decided to talk to someone I trusted, Leela, a friend I'd met in Austin a few years ago. She wasn't family, just a kind woman who ran a small bookstore near my apartment. We de-bonded over coffee, and I'd shared bits of my story with her, though never the full weight of it. I walked to her shop, the bell jingling as I stepped inside, the air smelling of paper and ink. Leela was behind the counter, her glasses perched on her nose. "You look like you've got the world on your shoulders," she said, gesturing to a stool. I sat down and told her everything, Diane's call, the letter, the way she'd kicked me out at 17. Leela listened, her face softening with every word. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Hannah, you don't owe her a thing. She made her choice back then, and you've built a life without her. Don't let her guilt you into giving that up." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me back from the doubt. Leela wasn't just being kind, she was right. Diane had chosen to cut me out, to blame me for her pain instead of facing it. I didn't have to open my door to her now, just because she was desperate. I thanked Layla, feeling a little steadier, and walked home with a plan forming. I needed to set clear boundaries, to make sure Diane understood I wasn't budging. If she called again or showed up, I'd repeat what I'd said. I wasn't her backup plan. But I also needed to protect my space, to make sure she couldn't push her way back into my life. Back at my apartment, I started by writing a response to Diane's letter, not to send, but to clarify my own thoughts. I sat at my small kitchen table, pen in hand, and poured out everything I hadn't said on the phone. "You threw me out when I was a kid, Diane," I wrote. "You blamed me for your divorce, for your unhappiness, and left me with nothing. I've spent years fighting the fear you gave me, the feeling that I'm not worth keeping. Now you want my help because you're out of options. That's not how this works." Writing it felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for years. I didn't need to mail it. Putting it on paper was enough to remind me why I was standing my ground. I also took practical steps. I told my landlord to keep an eye out for anyone asking about me, just in case Diane showed up. I checked my locks, made sure my phone was set to screen unknown numbers. I wasn't afraid of her, not exactly, but I knew how persistent she could be. The letter had shown she wasn't giving up, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. A call, another letter, or even her at my door. The fear of abandonment still lingered, making me second-guess myself, but I kept Leela's words in mind. I de-built this life, and I wasn't letting Diane take it away. As I walked along the river that evening, the Austin skyline glowing against the dusk, I felt a quiet strength growing. Diane's plea had stirred up old pain, but it also showed me how far I'd come. I wasn't the girl she'd thrown out anymore. I was Hannah Carter, and I was choosing myself, no matter how hard she begged. But I knew this wasn't the end. She'd try again, and I had to be prepared to hold my line. The Austin morning was warm, the sun filtering through my apartment blinds as I sipped coffee at my kitchen table. The letter from my mother, Diane Carter, sat in a drawer, its words, her half-hearted apology and plea for help, still burning in my mind. She'd kicked me out at 17, blaming me for her divorce from my father, calling me just like him as she slammed the door. That betrayal left me with a deep fear of abandonment, a knot of distrust that made every friendship, every connection feel like a risk. I'd told her on the phone I wasn't her backup plan, and writing my unsent response had helped me hold my ground. But I knew Diane, her stubbornness, her need to control. The letter wasn't the end. She'd try again, and I had to be ready to protect the life I'd built in Austin. I was right. A few days later, I was coming back from a walk along Lady Bird Lake when I saw her. Diane, standing outside my apartment building, her hair grayer than I remembered, her clothes worn and wrinkled. She was leaning against the wall, clutching a small bag, her face a mix of desperation and defiance. My heart thudded, that old panic from my teenage years flaring up, the fear of her cold stare, her sharp words. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I took a breath and walked toward her, keeping my steps steady. "Hannah," she said as I approached, her voice softer than I expected but still edged with urgency. "I need to talk to you, please." I stopped a few feet away, arms crossed, keeping the distance between us. "You already said what you needed to on the phone," I replied, my tone even. "And in your letter, I meant what I said. I'm not helping you." Her face crumpled, but she didn't back down. "I'm your mother," she said, stepping closer. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm in trouble. I have nowhere to go. You can't just turn your back on me." Her words hit like a punch, stirring up the hurt from that night in Houston when she'd locked me out with nothing but a suitcase. I could still feel the cold pavement under my feet, the sting of her words. "You're not my problem anymore." I looked at her now, her eyes pleading, and felt a flicker of pity, but it was drowned out by the truth. "You turned your back on me first," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor inside. "I was 17, Diane. You threw me out because you couldn't handle your own pain. I've built a life without you, and I'm not letting you tear it down." She started to speak, her voice rising. "You're being cruel, Hannah. I'm sorry, okay? I was wrong. Just give me a chance." I shook my head. "You don't get to decide when you're sorry. You don't get to walk back in now." I turned and walked inside, closing the door before she could follow. My hands were shaking as I leaned against the door, the sound of her knocking fading as she gave up. That confrontation brought it all back. The fear, the rejection, the years I'd spent piecing myself together in Austin. I'd worked so hard to feel safe, to trust even a little, but Diane's presence threatened to unravel it. I needed to talk to someone to anchor myself. Leela, my friend from the bookstore, had helped before, but I didn't want to lean on her again so soon. Instead, I thought of Marcus, a barista at my favorite coffee shop near downtown. We chatted often, swapping stories over late-night lattes, and he'd always been a good listener, never pushy. He wasn't family, just someone who'd become a small part of my Austin life. I walked to the coffee shop, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and the hum of conversation. Marcus was behind the counter, his easy smile fading when he saw my face. "Rough day?" he asked, sliding a coffee my way. I sat at the counter and told him about Diane, how she'd kicked me out at 17, how she'd shown up begging for help, how I'd sent her away. I didn't go into every detail, but enough for him to get it. "She thinks she can just come back because she's out of options," I said, stirring my coffee. "But I can't let her in, not after what she did." Marcus nodded, leaning on the counter. "Sounds like she's trying to guilt you," he said. "You've got every right to say no. You built this life, Hannah. Don't let her take that from you." His words were simple but solid, echoing Leela's advice and grounding me further. I thanked him, feeling a little less alone. Back at my apartment, I pulled out the letter I'd written to Diane, the one I hadn't sent, and read it again. Writing it had helped me process, but now I wanted to be ready for whatever she tried next. I knew Diane's persistence. She might call again, send another letter, or show up with more apologies. I needed a plan to keep my boundaries firm. I decided to draft a short note to have ready if she contacted me again. I grabbed a pen and wrote, "Diane, I've said what I needed to. You made your choice when you threw me out. I'm not responsible for you now. Please don't contact me again." It was direct, final, and it felt right. I tucked it into an envelope, not to send yet, but to keep on hand if she pushed further. I also took more practical steps. I told my landlord again to watch for anyone lingering around the building, emphasizing that I didn't want unexpected visitors. I started varying my routine, taking different routes on my walks, avoiding the coffee shop at predictable times, in case Diane tried to track me down. The fear of abandonment still gnawed at me, making me question if I was too harsh, but Marcus's words, like Leela's, kept me steady. I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting myself. Diane had chosen to break me years ago, and I wasn't letting her do it again. As I walked along the river that evening, the Austin skyline glowing against the dusk, I felt a quiet strength growing. Diane's visit had shaken me, but it also showed me how far I'd come. I wasn't the girl who'd begged her to let me stay. I was Hannah Carter, and I was holding my ground. But I knew she wasn't done. She'd try again, and I had to be ready to keep saying no, to keep choosing myself. The Austin air was thick with summer heat as I walked home from the coffee shop, the city's skyline glowing faintly against the evening sky. My confrontation with Diane outside my apartment a few days ago still lingered, her desperate pleas and accusations. "You're being cruel, Hannah. echoing alongside the memory of her slamming the door on me at 17. That night in Houston, when she'd called me, just like my father, and threw me out, had left me with a fear of abandonment that shadowed every relationship, every moment of trust. I'd told her I wasn't her backup plan, first on the phone, then to her face, and I'd leaned on Leela and Marcus, my non-family confidants, to stay grounded. But Diane's persistence, her call, her letter, her showing up, told me she wasn't done. I needed to brace for her next move, to keep my boundaries firm and protect the life I'd built in Austin. A few evenings later, as I sat in my apartment, the buzz of my phone broke the quiet. It was an unknown number, but I knew it was her. I let it ring, my heart pounding, before answering. "Hannah," Diane's voice came through, softer now, almost calculated. "I know you're angry, but please hear me out. I'm not asking for much, just a place to stay for a few weeks. I've got nowhere else to go, and I'm trying to fix things. Don't you want to be a family again?" Her words were a twist of the knife, playing on guilt, on the idea of family she'd shattered years ago. I gripped the phone, my voice steady. "You stopped being my family when you kicked me out," I said. "You don't get to use that word now because it suits you." She paused, then her tone shifted, sharper. "You're so ungrateful. I raised you, and this is how you repay me." I hung up before she could say more, my hands trembling but my resolve intact. Her manipulation only made me surer. I wasn't letting her back in. The call left me shaken, stirring up that old fear of being unwanted. I could still hear her voice from that night in Houston, telling me I wasn't her problem anymore. I needed to ground myself, to remind myself why I was saying no. I pulled out the unsent letter I'd written, reading my own words. "You made your choice when you threw me out. I'm not responsible for you now." It helped, but I needed more than words on a page. I decided to talk to Leela again, the bookstore owner who'd become my anchor. I walked to her shop the next morning, the bell jingling as I stepped inside. Leela was stacking books, her warm smile fading when she saw my expression. "Diane again?" she asked, pulling me to a quiet corner. I told her about the call, how Diane had tried to guilt me with talk of family, then lashed out when I refused. "She's not stopping," I said, my voice low. "It's like she thinks she can wear me down." Leela set down a book, her eyes steady. "She's trying to control you again, Hannah. That's what she did when you were a kid, made you feel like you owed her. You don't. You've built something real here, and you're allowed to protect it." She paused, then added, "You're stronger than she thinks." "Don't let her make you doubt that." Leela's words cut through the fog of my fear, reminding me of the life I'd carved out in Austin, the walks by the river, the small moments of peace I'd fought for. I thanked her, feeling a little steadier, but I knew I needed to prepare for Diane's next attempt. That afternoon, another letter arrived, this time in my mailbox. Diane's handwriting was unmistakable, though shakier than before. "Hannah," it read, "I'm sorry for what I said on the phone. I'm scared, alone, and I know I don't deserve your help. But I'm your mother, and I'm begging you to give me a chance to make things right. I regret what I did. Please let me stay with you." The word regret stood out, but it felt like another tactic, a way to pull me in. I remembered her face that night in Houston, blank as she locked the door. This wasn't about me, it was about her survival. I tucked the letter into the drawer with the others, my resolve hardening. I wasn't going to respond, not yet, but I added a line to my draft note. Your regret doesn't erase what you did. Stop contacting me. To protect my space, I took more steps. I spoke to my landlord again, asking him to alert me if anyone came looking for me. I also told Marcus, the barista, to keep an eye out at the coffee shop, since it was a place I frequented. He nodded, his usual easy grin replaced by concern. You don't need that kind of stress, Hannah, he said. If she shows up here, I'll let you know. Their support, Leela's wisdom, Marcus's quiet loyalty, felt like a shield against Diane's persistence. I also started carrying my draft note with me, folded in my bag, ready to hand over if she appeared again. It was a small thing, but it made me feel prepared, like I had a piece of my strength in my pocket. Reflecting on it all, I sat by the Colorado River one evening, the water reflecting Austin's lights. The fear of abandonment Diane had burned into me was still there, whispering that I was being too cold, too unforgiving. But Leela's words, Marcus's support, and my own written truth pushed back. I thought about the years I'd spent rebuilding, scraping by in Austin, learning to trust myself, finding small joys in the city's rhythm. Diane had taken that from me once, but I wasn't letting her do it again. Her letters, her calls, her showing up, they were all attempts to claw her way back, but I was done being her scapegoat. I knew she'd try again. Diane wasn't the type to give up when she wanted something. Maybe another call, maybe showing up at the coffee shop. But I was ready. I'd keep saying no, keep choosing myself, no matter how hard she pushed. The life I'd built in Austin was mine, and I wasn't giving it up for her regret. The Austin skyline glowed softly as I sat in my apartment, the hum of the city outside a quiet comfort. My mother, Diane Carter, wasn't giving up. Her calls, her letter, her showing up at my building, they were all attempts to claw her way back into my life after she'd kicked me out at 17, blaming me for her divorce with the words, "Just like your father." That abandonment had left me with a deep fear of rejection, a distrust that made every connection feel fragile. I'd told her, over the phone and to her face, that I wasn't her backup plan, and I'd leaned on Leela, the bookstore owner, and Marcus, the barista, to keep my resolve. I'd written a note to have ready. Your regret doesn't erase what you did. Stop contacting me, and taken steps to protect my space, but Diane's persistence was wearing me down. I knew she'd try again, and I had to be ready to hold my ground, to keep choosing the life I'd built in Austin over her desperation. It came sooner than I expected. I was leaving my apartment one morning, heading for a walk by Lady Bird Lake, when I saw a new envelope taped to my door. Diane's handwriting, shakier than before, spelled out my name. My stomach twisted, but I took it inside and opened it. The letter was longer this time, her words dripping with guilt and manipulation. "Hannah," she wrote, "I know I failed you. I was lost after the divorce and I took it out on you. I see now how wrong I was. I'm living in a motel, barely eating, with no one to turn to. You're my daughter, my only family. I'm begging you to forgive me, to let me stay with you. I'll do anything to make it right." She ended with, "I regret everything. Please don't let me die alone." The word die hit hard, a calculated jab to pull at my heart. I could feel her trying to burrow into my guilt to make me feel responsible for her survival. But I saw it for what it was, another attempt to control me, just like when I was a kid. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter in front of me, my hands steady but my mind racing. The fear she'd instilled, that I was unworthy, that I'd always be left, surged up, whispering that maybe I was being too harsh. But I pushed it back, remembering the night she'd slammed the door, her cold voice saying I wasn't her problem. I pulled out my unsent letter and read my own words. "You threw me out when I was a kid, Diane. I'm not responsible for you now." It grounded me, reminding me of the truth. She wasn't sorry for me. She was sorry for herself for losing everything. I added a line to my prepared note. "Your letters won't change my answer. Leave me alone." I slipped it back into my bag, ready to hand it to her if she showed up again. I needed to talk to someone to stay strong. Leela had been a rock, but I didn't want to lean on her again so soon. Instead, I thought of Sarah, a regular at the coffee shop who'd become a friend over shared conversations about books and life. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with a quiet wisdom that reminded me of Leela. I walked to the coffee shop, the air warm and heavy, and found Sarah at a corner table, sipping tea. I sat down and told her about Diane's latest letter, how it felt like a trap to guilt me. "She's trying to make me feel like I owe her," I said, my voice low. "But I don't, not after what she did." Sarah listened, her eyes kind but firm. "Hannah, she's playing on your heart because she knows it's there," she said. "You don't have to carry her pain. You've carried enough. Say no and mean it. She can't take your life from you again." Her words were like a deep breath, steadying me. I thanked her, feeling my resolve harden. That evening, Diane called again. I screened the call, letting it go to voicemail. Her message was frantic, her voice cracking. "Hannah, I got your message from last time, but please, I'm begging you. I'm at the end of my rope. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. Just let me see you, talk to you. I don't want to lose you forever." The apology felt heavier this time, her regret more raw, but it still rang hollow. She wasn't sorry for the years I'd spent rebuilding, for the fear she'd burned into me. She was sorry for her own situation. I deleted the message, my fingers steady, and clutched the note in my bag. If she showed up again, I'd hand it to her. No more words, just the truth. To protect myself further, I doubled down on my precautions. I asked Marcus to let me know if anyone came to the coffee shop asking for me, and he agreed, his face serious. "You've got this, Hannah," he said. "Don't let her mess with your head." I also checked in with my landlord, who promised to keep an eye out for strangers near the building. I started avoiding my usual routines, taking new paths on my walks, skipping the coffee shop some days. The fear of abandonment still tugged at me, making me question if I was too cold. But Sarah's words, like Leila's and Marcus' kept me grounded. I wasn't the one who'd broken us, Diane had. And I wasn't letting her back in to do it again. Sitting by the Colorado River that night, the city's lights reflecting on the water, I reflected on how far I'd come. The girl who'd been thrown out with a suitcase was gone, replaced by someone who'd fought for every piece of this life, every walk, every quiet moment in Austin. Diane's letters and calls were tests, but they were also proof of my strength. I could say no, mean it, and keep moving forward. I knew she'd try again. Her desperation was growing, and that voicemail showed she wasn't giving up. But I was ready. My note was in my bag, my boundaries were set, and I was choosing myself, no matter how much she begged or how loudly her regret echoed. The Austin night was warm, the Colorado River reflecting the city's lights as I sat in my apartment, the weight of my mother's persistence heavy on my mind. Diane Carter had been relentless. Her calls, her letters, her showing up at my building, all begging for a place to stay after she'd lost everything. At 17, she'd kicked me out, blaming me for her divorce with the words, "Just like your father," leaving me with a suitcase and a fear of abandonment that still made trust feel like a gamble. I'd told her I wasn't her backup plan, over the phone to her face, and through the note I carried in my bag. "Your regret doesn't erase what you did. Stop contacting me." Leela, Marcus, and Sarah, my non-family confidants, had kept me grounded, reminding me of the life I'd built in Austin. But Diane's last letter and voicemail, dripping with desperation and regret, told me she wasn't done. I knew a final stand was coming, and I was ready to choose myself once and for all. It happened on a quiet evening, just as I was returning from a walk by Lady Bird Lake. I saw her before she saw me, Diane, sitting on the steps of my apartment building, her small bag beside her, her face worn and tired. My heart thudded, that old panic flaring, but I gripped the note in my bag, its weight steadying me. I approached, keeping my distance, my voice calm but firm. "Diane, I told you to stop coming here," I said. She looked up, her eyes red, her voice breaking as she stood. "Hannah, please, just listen," she said, stepping closer. "I'm sorry. I was wrong to push you out. I was angry, broken, and I took it out on you. I've got nothing left, no home, no one. You're all I have. Please let me stay just for a little while." Her words were raw, her regret clear in her trembling voice, but they didn't move me the way she wanted. I saw the truth. Her apologies were for her own survival, not for the years she'd stolen from me. I remembered that night in Houston, the door slamming, her cold voice saying I wasn't her problem. I remembered the fear she'd burned into me, the way I still hesitated to let people close, afraid they'd leave like she did. I pulled the note from my bag, the one I'd written and rewritten, and held it out. "This is my answer," I said, my voice steady. "Read it and don't come back." She took the note, her hands shaking, and opened it. Her eyes scanned the words. "Diane, you threw me out when I was a kid, blaming me for your pain. Your regret doesn't erase what you did. I'm not responsible for you now. Stop contacting me." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Hannah, please," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. I'm your mother." I shook my head, standing tall. "You stopped being my mother when you locked that door. I've built a life without you, and I'm keeping it. Go." She stood there, clutching the note, her shoulders slumping as she realized I meant it. She turned and walked away, her steps slow, her bag dragging behind her. I went inside, my hands trembling but my heart lighter. That moment, handing her the note, watching her leave, was the closure I'd been fighting for. Diane's regret was real, but it wasn't enough to undo the past. I'd spent years rebuilding, piecing together a life in Austin, despite the fear she'd left me with. I wasn't the scared 17-year-old begging to stay. I was Hannah Carter, and I'd chosen myself. To ground myself, I went to see Leela the next day at her bookstore, the smell of paper and ink a familiar comfort. I told her about the confrontation, how I'd given Diane the note, how she'd walked away. Leela smiled, her eyes warm. "You did it, Hannah," she said. "You stood up for yourself, not just for now, but for that girl she hurt. You're free." Her words sank in, easing the last of my doubts. I stopped by the coffee shop to thank Marcus and Sarah, too, for their support. Marcus grinned, sliding me a coffee. "Knew you had it in you," he said. Sarah just nodded, her quiet strength a reminder of why I'd trusted her. Reflecting on it all, I walked along the river that night, the Austin skyline glowing against the water. The fear of abandonment Diane had given me was still there, a quiet ache that might never fully fade. But it didn't control me anymore. I thought about the years I'd spent surviving, scrambling for odd jobs, finding my place in this city, learning to trust myself. Diane's calls, her letters, her desperate pleas, they'd tested me, but they'd also shown me my strength. I didn't need her apology or her regret to move forward. I had my life, my peace, and I'd fought for every piece of it. I knew Diane might try again someday, another letter, another call, but I was ready. The note I'd given her was my line in the sand, a boundary she couldn't cross. I'd faced her, faced the pain of that night in Houston, and come out stronger. As I stood by the river, the city's hum around me, I felt a quiet freedom. I wasn't the girl she'd thrown out. I was Hannah Carter, and I'd chosen myself, not out of anger, but out of love for the life I'd built. Diane's regret was hers to carry, and I was finally letting go of mine.